So, Mr. Jean-Christophe Bas, welcome to the Bucharest Forum. You are a CEO for the Dialogue of Civilization in Berlin, but you're also a board member for the Aspen Institute in France. So, the first question hinders on these two elements, in these two positions. What's your outlook on the European Union future, on Europe and the world at large? Not a crystal ball, but, just your own opinion.
Well, I don't know if I have 3 minutes, 3 hours, or 3 days to respond to this question, but first of all, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, to be with Aspen, Romania. It's very good from Aspen, France perspective, which I represent here, to have a strong and a vibrant partner here in Bucharest, and we are great fans and willing to collaborate with Aspen, Romania. You asked me about, let's say, the state of the world, or the state of Europe, and even more broadly, the state of the world. Well, I think it's very hard to be optimistic and to be very positive those days. Obviously, Europe is confronted to many challenges. And in a way, it is a bit at a crossroad, because next year we will have the European elections in May and June, and that in a way it will be, to a certain extent, a moment of truth, because probably for the first time ever in 30 years of European election, there will be a real debate about Europe and the nature of the European project, because usually the European elections are kidnapped by domestic consideration, but this time there is obviously a growing gap, between those, who in a way don't want anymore about the European project, or would really want to remake entirely the European project, and with a predominant voice from the nation and country, and those who consider that we need to go even further, and that the world where we are today, with the globalization and the rise of China, the rise of India, and many other parts of the world, requires a Europe that is even stronger, even more integrated, and so I believe that European citizens will have a real choice next year, either indeed to go or to promote a European project that will make Europe even stronger, with a stronger voice on the global stage, or those who are exactly at the opposite of the spectrum, and who consider that the only way European culture, European economy can survive will be at let's say, the country level. So this, in a way, is a fundamental choice. It is also a fundamental choice in regard of what is happening in the United States, and this is what we discussed this morning in the plenary session of the Bucharest Forum. To what extent the relationship between Europe and United States are still strong, they are still in a way as they were during the past decades, and what should be done in a way to maintain a strong transatlantic relationship. And in a way, because you asked me about the state of the world or world affairs, I think there is a big concern, with in a way a profound questioning of the multilateral system. We have been since World War II working and developing with this international framework and trying to hang together beyond our differences, and in a way the multilateral system is certainly not to agree on everything, but at least it's to acknowledge and recognize that the world has a lot of, let's say, interest and also challenge and concern in common, and the only way we can sort out those challenges is to work together, even beyond differences and beyond cultural boundaries. And so this, in a way, pattern is considerably challenged by Donald Trump and also a few other leaders, but mostly by Donald Trump, who is considering that the best effective way, to sort out problem and to make America great again is through bilateral agreement and in a way dropping most of the international agreement, being on climate change, the Paris Accord, or on trade, or also on the nuclear agreement with Iran. And so, I mean, these were years of discussion from the international community to try to reach a consensus, which are in a way dropped in a minute by the President of the United States, which in a way create a significant tension in the global system. And so there is a big question mark. And in a way, to respond to your question, there is lots of anxiety, because we are entering an era where we have no idea how things will evolve let's say in the year to come, and so this is in a way creating anxiety, and hopefully there will be some positive development, but this is a major in a way source of concern, and that could be in a way summarized with this famous sentence from the philosopher Gramsci from the past century, who said the old world has died, the new world is struggling to be born, and in the meanwhile are coming up the monsters. And so the risk is indeed that in this sort of a vacuum, between the old world and the new world, would come up what we could call the monsters or the major threats. And I think that the key challenge today is really to identify the best effective way to mitigate this risk of major crisis, major chaos, and eventually the risk of conflict and war.
In this kind of bleak outlook, and building on the name of your organization, the Dialogue of Civilizations, building on the idea that Aspen US has a festival of ideas, how do you see the role of such a fora as the Bucharest Forum, and how do you see the role of Aspen Institutes worldwide?
Well, I mean, as you know, I'm a very strong, I'm a very old follower and member of I would not even say community family, the Aspen family. I was the first executive director in France 25 years ago, and I remained fully involved with the Aspen. So I really believe in, let's say, the virtue and the role of the Aspen Institute, and I really believe that a forum like the Bucharest Forum indeed serves the purpose of exchange and dialogue in a way to try to, to find common ground, in a way to try to find innovative solution, bringing people and leaders from different parts of the world in an informal setting and speaking freely. I think this is immensely useful. And in that respect also, I mean, the Aspen Institute is playing an extremely important role, and, it has this absolutely amazing convening powers, this capacity to bring around the table people and leaders and thinkers and decision makers from all perspectives, and I think this is more needed than any time. This being said, and in a way, I mean, belonging myself to the family, I also apply this eventually critique or nuance to myself, is that I think also the time has come to open up to those who also think differently. There is some sort of comfort zone in being among people who have a tendency to eventually have slightly different approach, but who are not in a way challenging each other's views. And in a way, we are in a world where the gaps and the position from one and the other are increasingly polarized, and I think it is quite important at some point to see how to engage with those who think differently, who have different world perspective and world views, and in my position now as the CEO of the Dialogue of Civilization Institute in Berlin, my role and my ambition is really to provide with the DOC, the Dialogue of Civilization Institute, a unique platform where Western world, Western values can meet and engage with decision makers and influencing figures from the emerging world and alternative thinking. I think, to a certain extent, the Western world has been, and I belong to it, but the Western world has been a little bit lazy, considering that our own values, our own principles, which are supposed to be universal, are considered as such by everyone. And in a way, what we have learned in the past 5, 10, 15 years with emerging countries, rising world, alternative thinking, is that the BRICS or the emerging countries is not just an economic and financial and trade phenomenon. It is also the willingness from the countries and the culture that are emerging economically and financially to have a seat at the table when it comes to values, when it comes to culture, when it comes to principle. And I think that the role, in a way, also of the Aspen Institute is, in a way, to open up to those who think differently and to engage in a conversation, and which doesn't mean that we will have to compromise or that we will have to agree on everything. But I think what is important through the Aspen dialogue is at least to agree on how to disagree, which would be just in itself a major accomplishment, because if you and I, or if anyone, agree on how to disagree, at least, this is the beginning of the journey, and that we start talking to each other, understanding that we disagree on some principle, but explaining why. Why is it that we think that way, and that this is the beginning of a mutual understanding. And I think that we should certainly not drop our identity, our views, and our culture and our belief, but I think it is very important to see how to engage with the other, and also to, in a way, to respect the difference. What really I think is extremely scary now is this is a kind of a black and white on almost on everything. And in a way, I was very shocked and pained by what I heard from the President of the United States at the General Assembly of the UN just 10 days ago, when he was really antagonizing and saying, on one side you have the patriots, and on the other side you have the globalists. And I think this doesn't really make sense. I really feel that I'm a patriot, but I also belong to the global community, and I also belong to my local community. And I think that a globalist is nothing else than a patriot that is having worldview that go beyond just the limit of one nation. And there is no antagonism. You can be both at the same time, and even further, there was this magnificent book from Amin Malouf, the Lebanese writer, who said that identity is a multi-layer scheme. Where you belong to your local community. I was born and grew up in Alsace at the border with Germany, and this is part of myself and my identity, but I'm equally French, and I'm equally European, and I'm equally a global citizen. And I think that we can live in a comfortable way with this multiple dimension, and I think it is really taking a big risk in antagonizing those, who are considered the patriots, and those who are supposed to ignore, to be rootless. I think this is, and I'm really willing to speak up on this topic, because I think it is really misleading, and that we need, in a way, to respect that people can feel and can behave a bit differently.
And to conclude, because you have mentioned the Aspen family, a message to the Aspen family.
Well, first, to have the capacity, in a way, to not to reinvent itself, because I think there is no need to reinvent itself, but Aspen was born right in the aftermath of World War II with a very illuminating or clear vision from Walter Paepcke and those, who were the founding fathers, with Mortimer Adler and a few others, who got this conviction in 1945, 6, 7, that the world would be increasingly open and globalized, and that there was a need to, if we were to work and to do things together, to create a global community, a global architecture, institutional architecture, financial architecture, economic architecture, that was not enough, and that there was a need to understand the culture of the other. And I think, this vision was absolutely, this is what really brought me and inspired me for the past 25 years with the Aspen Institute, is that the founders really got this absolute conviction that globalization, being the globalization, the economy of finance, of trade, or whatsoever, is not just setting standards and setting rules, but it has fundamentally a human and a cultural dimension. And I think this is what, in a way, has to be either revived or put again up front in the Aspen Institute, is to say that we need to understand and to have a better cultural mutual understanding if we want to be able to create a global framework or global cooperation framework that would be sustainable and that would be accepted by all. So in a way, my message is really to tell to the Aspen family the initial vision 60 years back is more important than ever to put the humanistic and cultural and civilizational dimension at the very heart of the global project.
Thank you.